Now that we've looked at logical and comparison operators, we're going to move on to arithmetic in JavaScript, so arithmetic operators. And we'll look at the standard arithmetic operations that we can perform, but then we'll go on to some of the more, not unusual, but some of the more sort of less used and certainly still useful operators. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and load up our browser, and we can do everything in the browser here. There's no need to really write any code here. We set variables in JavaScript, but I suppose we could. It makes sense to create a couple of variables. So let's create a variable number1, and let's have that equal to 50, and then we'll say number2 equal to 100, for example. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a result equal to something. Now, the first thing that we can do in JavaScript, as we can with most programming languages, is we can add two numbers together. So we can say number1 plus number2. So if we go ahead and just console log all of these results so we can get an idea of what's being output, we can see that we get 150, because 50 add 100 is 150. What we can also do is we can divide or subtract. Well, I'll show you subtract in a moment. Very, very basic. So 0.5 we've got there. Subtract, so obviously 50 subtract 100 is going to be a negative number, so it will be minus 50. And we can also multiply with the asterisk as well, and that will then give us this result here, so 5,000. Now what we can also do is we can also group operations. So we can say we want number1 add number2, and let's create and sort of introduce a number 3 into here. Let's say 5. Let's say we want number1 add number2 add number 3. Now how is this going to work? Let's say divided by number 3, which will be 2. So number1 add number 2 is 150, and then divided by 2 should be 75, but we still get the value 100 here, which is really strange. Now why is this? Well, what's happening is this is happening first. So it is saying number 2 divided by number 3 is 50, and then it's adding it to number 1, because the the order of this operation is taking the divide first and then adding it to number 1. What we need to do here is we need to group this with brackets to say that we want this operation first, and then we want to divide it by number 3. And then if just by placing them brackets in, we get a completely different result. So we get the result that we intended originally for this operation. So that's basically the very plain and basic operators and how we add and subtract and all the boring stuff, but the things that we will do probably on an everyday basis. Now, slightly more interesting is things like remainders. So for example, let's say number1 mod or modulus or remainder or whatever you want to call it, number 2. So what's this going to do? Well, it's going to work out how many times something will go into something with a remainder. So it will go into something, well, let's take a look at a slightly more basic example. Let's say something like number1 is, I don't know, 10, and number 2's, let's say 16, for example. So we know that 5 goes into 16 3 times with a remainder 1. So if we were to do this operation now, we get the result 1 back. So why is this useful? Well, it's useful for things like, I mean, I've certainly found it useful in the past, of things like calculating rows, for example, on a table. If we want to color a specific row, we can find out whether a row is odd or even or not. It can be used for a variety of different things, that it could be to do with page numbers or anything like that. But basically, it's there if you need it, and it's probably one of the most, less used operators, but it still has its use. And in mathematics, obviously, if something was very mathematical, it would have even more of a use. So let's move on now to take a look at something completely different. I'm just going to create a one number, and I'm going to call this number 1. I'm going to get rid of the console log result. And I'm going to refresh my browser, and I'm going to type number into the console. We get number. Now, there's an operator in JavaScript called increment, and there's one called decrement as well. And increment's going to add 1 to this number. So if I say number plus plus, that should give me 2, like this. So every time I do this, it's adding on a number to this number. So what we can do is, we can do this in a slightly different way. So let's just say result equals number plus plus. If we go ahead and we console log result, you'll see that this will be 2. So we'll have 2 output to the console. Oh no, we have 1. So this is quite interesting actually, because what's happened here is we have incremented this value, but what's happened is it's outputting the result before this has been incremented. What we actually do is if we prefix the number that we want to increment with, this will actually give us the value after the increment has taken place. So this will still work, but it will, if we go ahead and immediately output it, it's going to have the number as it was before the increment, so even though the increment has taken place. And we can do the same with decrement as well, so we can decrement this by 1, and that will obviously give us a value of 0. So it's important to understand the difference between having this here and here. If we were to say result 2 equals result, let's take a look at what that might give us. That gives us back 1, so we're still getting this result out. And if we were to do this like this and then say result 2, we get back 1 still. Result, we get back 1. So adding the decrement or increment before will give you the, if it's postfix or prefix. If it's prefix, it will give you the value after the increment or the decrement, or if it's postfix, it will return the value before the increment. So it's important to understand that. But yeah, that's basically how you increment and decrement. Now the alternative is obviously to do something like this. Number, result equals number plus 1. So we can just add 1 onto it. Or we could even say number equals number plus 1, which is the same as doing number plus plus. So that will obviously, oops, we have a little syntax error there. That will obviously give us the value of there we go. If we console log number rather than result, that will give us the value of 2, because we have said number equals number, which is 1, add 1, which is 2, and then it puts it back into the number variable. So we can do that as well. What we can also do is if we just have a bog standard number, so let's say we have 5, let's go and take a look what we can do inside of the console here. If I was to say number, that's 5, but what about if I was to say minus number? Well, that gives us the negation, so we can do a negation. We can also do a plus as well. So if we were to start off with a -5, for example, or let's just change this to -10, we can see here that if we were to say number, we get -10, and if we were to say plus number, we still get -10. Now the reason for this is that earlier we were looking at things like passing numbers. Let's just say that number was a string, so let's go ahead and change this to a -10, for example. Go ahead and refresh. If I was to say number, we now know that this is a string. If I was to now say plus number, what that's going to do is actually convert that to a number. So by using plus, we're almost using a shorthand way of evaluating something to a string. And again, if we have something like Alex as a number, which obviously isn't a number, you'll probably already guess if we were to say number, Alex, plus